Hey everybody, just a short message about this episode. In the last two editions of my Inspire and Activate Greatness newsletter, I've been highlighting some of the amazing progress being made to help paralyzed people walk and lead higher quality lives. And writing about these stories has me thinking about an episode I did with Sam Schmidt. Sam is an Indy race car driver and team owner who was paralyzed in an accident in 2000. Originally, this was episode number 128, but I'm re-releasing it today because Sam's life's mission is to conquer paralysis, which is also the name of his foundation. And since it seems to be happening, I thought you'd get some inspiration from hearing his story again. So I hope you enjoy. Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. As you heard in the introduction, I've got Sam Schmidt with me today. Sam, thanks for joining me.
Great to be here.
I do owe Teresa Easler a debt of gratitude for connecting Sam and I. She was on the podcast earlier. Hopefully you listened to that episode, and I knew Teresa from Strategic Coach, where she was my business coach for a number of years. And after she did the show, she was kind enough to introduce me to both to Sam and to another fellow named David Allen. And got a chance to talk with Sam maybe a month ago or so, and talked to him about the show, and he agreed to come on. I'm just thrilled to have him. So, Sam, I start every show with the same question, and that is, how did it happen for you?
Well, I guess I hit a wall at 210 and the wall didn't move.
Okay, that happens. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, I guess, I could go back to when my parents left the church when they were married, because my mom had to drive away from the church because my dad's license was revoked for street racing. So okay. My destiny was laid before I was even born.
You were born and started coming up. I assume your dad may have gotten his license back by then. How did you first get introduced to racing, and how did you figure out that was what you wanted to do?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a pretty common thing in motorsports that, if your dad and your parents are into it, you sort of evolve into it. It's clear with the Andrettis and the Unsers and those legacy names. But I think it's the same for a lot of people. On the other side of it, a lot of kids get involved in baseball, basketball, and football the same way. But my dad raced before I was born, drag racing, super modifieds in the Midwest. And he was known really well as a prolific welder and fabricator. And so this is the 60s. A guy in California named Don Brown was known for really, really, a builder of sprint cars, et cetera. So legends would buy sprint cars from him. He got a big order and called my dad and said, "Hey man, I don't know how many of these cars finished. I need you to get to California." Well, I was 2, load up the 55 Chevy, leave Nebraska, go to California, and you're never going to go back, right? So my dad started racing in Southern California. When I was 5, I didn't get a bicycle for Christmas. I got a motorcycle, and that was our life. We worked, after school, I'd come home and, work on my stuff. He'd work on his stuff, and every weekend we'd be racing, whether it was me at the motocross track or him at the super modified track. And I really didn't know anything different. I didn't think that was odd growing up, right? Fantastic way to build a family, and we were so tight. And little did I know later in my life that would be so important to my recovery, was the family and the attitude and the support, because it does. A situation like this affects your whole family, and if it wasn't for our faith in our community and our family, I don't think I'd be here today.
And so let's talk about that a little bit, Sam. The impact of something like what happened to you, really touches your whole family. Faith faith I understand. You need faith to get through something like this, but I'm just curious how, like, what was going on before this happened to you, and I guess afterwards, there had to be. I'm thinking there had to be a point where you're like, oh my gosh, it's never going to be the same, and some parts are never going to be the same. But how did you and your family rally around what needed to be done to keep making progress, as opposed to reflecting on what could have been if,
Yeah.
before something happened?
Well, I mean, from a very young age, racing the motocross. My dad raced off-road in Mexico. My hero was Rick Mears. Rick was from Bakersfield, California, racing the desert, then got hooked up with Roger Penske, raced Super Vs, and, from Bakersfield, California, winds up winning 4 Indy 500s. So, like, my target was set at a young age that I wanted to get to the Indy 500, and I wanted to race the Indy 500. Ultimately, I wanted to win the Indy 500. So, laser focus on that throughout high school. There wasn't any opportunities. So I did go off and get my MBA in international finance, because your family either to do this, that's what's different about soccer. Your family either has to have a pot of money, or you've got to find other people to support this. And so my family didn't have a pot of money. So I got a degree and started chasing the money myself and found people to sponsor my racing. Now, it took me longer to get there, and I didn't start racing until, on asphalt until I was, 22, 23 years old, which is really late, but that's how long it took me to get the money. And so, but we did make it. Long story short, fast forward, raced the Indy 500, 97, 98, 99, was very fast, fastest rookie in 97, 99, 98, 99, qualified 6th and 7th, and led the race in 99. So a lot of success there. 99 was my best year, where I finished 5th in the championship, sat on pole, won the Vegas race, which is kind of my adopted hometown.
Right.
And then it's like, here we are living in this euphoria of, had reached my goals with, racing at that level, beautiful wife, 7 years at a time, 6-month-old, 2.5-year-old, and this is everything I wanted, right? But 4 months later, you hit the wall, reality check, was knocked unconscious and not breathing for 5 minutes, airlifted to Orlando Regional Medical Center. And my dad was there with me because it was a testing crash, that they were having an open test. My wife had to grab the 6-month-old, take a red eye back. And so now we're kind of caught up to the question, right? And my wife just got off flying all night, and neurosurgeons aren't exactly known for their bedside manner. And this guy was right up there with it, when the first thing he says is, "Hey, the good news is you made it through the night. If he makes it through the week, you're going to want to find him a nursing home. He'll be on a ventilator for the rest of his life," which we would expect to be 3 to 5 years.
This is how he greets your wife.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
What he didn't realize is that when I was 11, my dad had an accident down in Mexico. His brain slapped up against his skull, which paralyzed his right side and lost his speech, much like a stroke. And our family went through that. And his doctor said he would never walk or talk again. But that's when I found out at a very young age, if you want my father to do something, tell him he can't. And he did 2 years of gut-wrenching outpatient therapy, 5 days a week, 2 hours a day. I went to some of the sessions and had a hard time handling it myself visually. So I didn't do that very often. But anyway, long story short, he got his walking back, got his speech back. The only thing he never got back was the use of his right arm. But he got back into business, buried himself in that, and continued to work until he was 65 years old, and then basically retired. And now he's 76 and still doing fine, right? So when I got hurt, that doctor didn't realize that was our background. That was my goalpost, so to speak. Uh, he didn't know the drive and determination that we had as a family. So they started calling, and all the spinal cord injury centers around the country. I was out of it. I don't remember at all the first couple of weeks. But they were calling. Everybody said, he's on a ventilator. We'll teach you how to live with it, but don't expect to get off the ventilator. But there was one doctor in St. Louis that said, if you get him here, we're going to work his butt off. We're going to do our best to get him off the ventilator, and very aggressive forms of physical therapy. And we'll just do our best. And that's what everybody wanted to hear. And he was the only guy to do it. His name was Dr. John McDonald. The only guy out there really gave us any sense of hope. And so 2 weeks after my accident, they had me on one of those medical airplanes, and they were sending me to St. Louis. And, kind of the rest is history, as they say. That guy got me off the ventilator 3 weeks later, and I started my intensive rehabilitation that I still continue to this day.
So I want to get back to the ventilator in a second, Sam, but you said something when you were talking about getting your MBA that, as a driver, you either have to have a pot of money. And I wanted to go back to that because I don't have a great understanding of what the race world is like, but I do, but I have heard enough stories about how, drivers, they basically have to pay their own way. I mean, they have to figure out a way to get somebody to sponsor them. And it's a very, very difficult road. So could you just tell me a little bit more about how difficult that road is and what a driver has to do to get a ride to become successful?
It was a lot less expensive then, but I don't know that it's entirely different than, say professional golf or tennis nowadays. Because if you're a kid and you want to, be one of those things, you have to specialize from a very young age. You typically have to go to an academy in Florida, live there full time, that whole thing. And that can't be inexpensive. But, in our world, a kid wants to start in go-karts kind of 6, 7, 8 years old at the latest. That is going to run the parent, between 100 and 150,000 a year to compete at that level. Now, if the kid's really good out of the box, he could get factory backing for the go-kart or for the engines or something, and not have to put up that full 150 grand. But it's kind of like the chicken and the egg. You got to spend something to at least find out if the kid's any good, and then hopefully he gets picked up with some sponsorships of equipment or whatever. But in no way, shape, or form is a kid at 8 years old getting paid. So a parent typically has to come up with that 150 grand from 6, 7, 8 until 15. And then if you're fortunate, you're going to move up to sort of F4 or F2000, they call it. And you're fortunate to only have to come up with 300,000 then.
Oh, okay.
And then if you do well, the next level is 550,000 at Indy Pro, and then Indy Lights is $1 million. And that's kind of like your AAA, AA, single A, or it's kind of like Little League or Pop Warner. Then there's high school, then there's college, but it's not free. It definitely costs. Now there are instances where kids have just been so shockingly good at a certain level that they'll get funding to move up through those levels. But man, that's like 1 in 1,000. So you got to ultimately start the process with about 8 million to just do that and get to Indy Lights and have the opportunity to be seen, so to speak. So, yeah, that's it. And we didn't have that. My dad had an automotive recycling facility, which is, most people know, is a junkyard. Sold used parts most of his life and worked his tail off, and paid for his own racing doing that. But that was just Mexico. And, he might spend 25, 30,000 a year on his own racing, not hundreds of thousands of dollars. So, my first year in Indycar, I was lucky. I only had to raise about $850,000, and I had the Indy 500. So that was easier than some kid in go-karts trying to do 150,000 with nothing to show anybody.
And so how do you, I'll just use you as an example, how do you raise $850,000 to get to be, so that you can race at Indy? How does one go about that?
Just relationships. I mean, it's another form of marketing. You acknowledge you're competing against billboards and front row tickets to the Laker game and all of these other things that companies spend money on. And to me, sports, kind of that motorsports, that behind the scenes, at the track, behind the pit wall, being really engaged with the team and whatnot is something that, we've had success selling on the activation side. Because you compare that to a suite at a Laker game, for example, your customers come in, you got about 20 minutes before the game, have a drink, they sit down, watch the game, in the fourth quarter they leave. How much time have you actually had with them? Not much.
Yeah, right.
And that's also typically, you can only do that in LA. Well, we have a road show and it's like a traveling circus. And so what I'm selling is the ability for you and your customers to have 2 days of, just nonstop activity. We build platforms from like come in on Saturday morning, play a round of golf at Beverly Hills Country Club, go over to Jay Little's garage, have dinner somewhere with the drivers, get a 2-seater ride in an Indycar 2-seater around the track, and then you watch the race and you go home. I mean, it's really, 48 hours of relationship building, you with your customer. And, that might be a couple $1,000s, but that's no more than you pay for courtside at Lakers games. So,
Right.
We're not selling a decal in a car. We're selling an experience.
Gotcha. Something that.
And I learned that at a very young age. And we also connect the dots, on B2B introductions and stuff like that. So, I guess at a very early age, I put my MBA to work and try to be different than everybody else. And again, now I got to raise 7-8 million a car. Back then I raised less than $1 million. So it's all relative. Just got to figure out a different way to do it.
Okay. And I want to come back to that too. So now I'm going to circle back to the ventilator and Dr. McDonald. What had to go on both mentally and physically for you to get off of the ventilator, Sam? Because if all these experts were saying, that's just going to be a part of your life or whatever's left of it, and he's saying, well, your own mind saying, well, don't tell me what's going to happen to me. But then Dr. McDonald is saying, you know what, I think I can get you off of this ventilator.
Yeah, I mean, that's a medical process they go to, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But you've got this ventilator in your throat, and they have different levels of filters. And so they just start kind of going day by day of blocking off that ventilator, and you trying on your own to energize your diaphragm and train yourself to be able to breathe without it, to where after hopefully a week or 10 days, they've got the thing fully closed off and you're breathing on your own. And hopefully, when they pull that thing out, you continue to breathe on your own. And I mean, I'll never forget, like I said, the first couple of weeks I was out of it on the move from Florida to St. Louis. It was a really, really bumpy ride in a very small jet. And I remember being tossed around quite a bit and the ventilator hose popping off and me kind of like blacking out because I couldn't breathe. And, there's probably a chapter in a book just in that flight from Florida to St. Louis. But then you get to St. Louis and the doctor that was assigned to me, the neurosurgeon assigned to me by Dr. McDonald, happened to be the neurosurgeon for the Rams. Well, he takes a look at my MRI and says, well, this is all wrong. We got to redo the apparatus in your neck. And that happened to be February 2000 when the Rams were in the Super Bowl. And Dr. McDonald said, well, fix it now, because I want to get him into physical therapy as soon as possible. The guy's like, well, I'm leaving for the Super Bowl. He says, not until you fix this. So I was there less than 24 hours and went into surgery in St. Louis to restabilize my neck because they had put metal in my neck to stabilize. I had no more C4 vertebrae. That was just gone. So they had a bridge between C3 and C5.
Okay.
And he didn't like the way it was done, didn't think it was stable enough. And Dr. McDonald didn't want to wait a week. So I got operated on that night. And then they just kind of became, I don't know, I was probably out of it another 2-3 days. And then he kind of began the process to wean me off the ventilator. And I got off it effectively about 7 weeks after my accident.
And how long was it before you were able to leave the hospital and start, the process of living your life the way that you have to live it now?
Yeah, it was a total of about 6 months. I went home in end of June of 2000, and the accident was January 6th. And of course, I went to from Florida to St. Louis, but so roughly 5.5 months in St. Louis. But I mean, I tell you, the time that I was on the ventilator was nothing short of a living hell, from temperature spikes to breathing issues to, just not being able to do the physical therapy because of the ventilator. And I can tell you without any doubt that if I had to stay on a ventilator, I would not be here 20 years later, because it was just literally day in and day out a living hell of, everything from suction to, just all kinds of things. And so very painful, very just demoralizing, and didn't have energy for anything, lost like 40 pounds. And so when they pulled the ventilator out, it was really like flipping on a switch. And I just immediately felt better and didn't have any of those issues I had previously. And I just had no idea it was going to have that kind of effect on me. But we went straight into the intensive rehabilitation and started doing, literally 5 and 6 hours a day, physical therapy for five months, trying to get, just bone density and muscle mass and atrophy, just trying to keep all that stuff away. So I was kind of glad I was in St. Louis, away from my friends and everybody else, because I could focus on it. Now, again, back to having, good insurance and a family and a community that supported me. I mean, I also realized that I was in the minority there, my family was able to load up the 4Runner and drive to St. Louis and get an apartment, and they were there in the morning and they were there at dinner for me. And so I got to see them every day. Most families can't do that, right? And I definitely realized that I have a leg up in that area.
And if I remember correctly, what I read, so you're quadriplegic, you're off the ventilator now, you're going through physical therapy, you begin to become introduced to other people who maybe have it, in your mind, have it worse than you, and so that starts to, that's kind of it's a hard thing for someone to imagine who isn't suffering with what you're suffering with, but you saw this, and that really gave you strength, right? I mean,
yeah, I mean, that's ultimately what started the foundation back then for Conquer Paralysis Now, because it was a specialized spinal cord injury wing of a hospital with 20 beds, and then there was 20 beds for brain injury, and you see people coming and going all the time, and it's what happened to Tony? He was only here a couple of weeks. Well, Tony didn't have insurance, or Tony didn't have enough insurance, or whatever. And I'm like, that really sucks. And then I'm getting bags of mail every day from fans and supporters, people in the motorsports community, and I got my parents and my wife and kids around me all the time, and these people don't have anything. They literally don't have a pot to piss in. It's like, man, this is really wrong that 65% of the people that have a brain injury or spinal cord injury or ALS or whatever. I mean, they're all living below the poverty level. And so that's why we started the foundation. We didn't know what we were going to do with it, but I had so many people offering to help, and I didn't want that to go to waste. But I did have my family, insurance, everything else. So I didn't really need the help, but all these other people did. And so it was emotional and motivational help for me, yes. But, if you guys want to give money, let's establish a foundation and figure out the best way to use it.
And so you established the foundation shortly after, right? Within the first year. And as I read, I mean, the goal was really to figure out a way to reverse paralysis, I guess. And so the 20 years in, where are you with the foundation? How has the progress been? And then what specifically have you actually gone through on your own to, like I'm thinking stem cells, or I'm thinking all these different things that are available recently, at least. Can you talk to me about that?
Yeah, I mean, first off, it's definitely been a process, no different than any for-profit company would go through. In that, first of all, I'm sitting there in the bed thinking about my previous 30 years. And up to that point, there had never been a goal that I couldn't achieve just through pure drive and determination. I mean, literally, whether it be racing related or college related or business related or Indy 500, I set that goal and I just went for it and I figured it out one way or the other. And spinal cord injury was really the first thing that it's like, holy crap, this is not easy. People have been working on this for a long time. And every spinal cord injury is different, the way the body takes that damage to the spinal cord. I mean, I've seen people with ugly looking spinal cords that are walking, and I've seen some with good looking spinal cords that can't get out of bed. So what's the difference? And it didn't take me long. I mean, like at first it was hell. We should be able to solve this. Just, money and time, and we can fix it. And then when I dug into it, it was like there are so many complicating factors. And it's not just spinal cord injury, it's transverse myelitis, ALS, MS, Parkinson's. I mean, these are all nerve-related disorders, which sort of broaden the marketplace, so to speak. But I realized that, yeah, I mean, when you think cure, you think stand up and walk is what everybody thinks. But the reality is, my definition has changed over time to where I just like to hug my kids. For me, that would be a cure. Other people, it is walking. Other people, it's, being able to get out of bed. So the foundation's evolved over the years. We've invested, I think it was close to $8 million specifically in the spinal cord injury research realm of stem cells, rehabilitation techniques. And I basically have seen a lot of rats walk. I'm sick of seeing rats walk. And now we want to see some humans walk. And really, it's just probably in the last 5 years that is starting to pay off. I mean, we have our own. First, there was a driver in a sprint car in Iowa who we put into our techniques and intensive rehabilitation. And he's now walking with a walker. My own driver, 2018, hit the catch fence at 220 in Pocono, had a spinal cord injury. They said he'd never walk or talk again. But through intensive rehabilitation, he's walking with a walker. And that's Robert Wickens from Toronto. And now there's 140,000 people watching his progress. So, social media can do a lot there. But at the end of the day, there's millions and millions of people living with this disorder around the world. And so the latest evolution of our foundation, is constantly searching for human clinical trials that we can invest in for everything from, bowel and bladder control to pain management, to rehabilitation techniques. And then the other side of it is we just kind of got pissed off at what wasn't available out there for the intensive rehabilitation, and the fact that insurance companies don't cover it, that we opened our own neuro recovery center in downtown Las Vegas. And, you know, back to our previous conversation, I was in rehabilitation with good insurance for 6 months. Now, 20 years later, I'd be lucky to get 2 months with excellent insurance. And most people get a month. And that's not enough. Your house isn't ready. You don't have a van. Your family's not ready. And they send you home and say, you're on your own. So our big, you know, initiative and advocacy and everything we're trying to do with a lot of the foundation now is just making sure insurance companies know that, you know, you pay me now or pay me later. If you send me home now without the proper level of independence and rehabilitation, I'm going to be back in 6 months with a $125,000 pressure sore or some other disorder that you're going to have to pay for. So you're better off to spend a little more money now with proper intensive rehabilitation and make me more independent so that I don't have to come back to the hospital. So this is the battle we're fighting. But, you know, I really enjoy it because, again, I know that I just had a lot of advantages in my situation that other people don't have. And the foundation is a conduit for us to try and address that as much as possible.
You mentioned a couple of examples of folks, well, back from your dad and now more recently, the you know, your team driver and some others. What has been the most optimistic thing you've seen in progress since you started the foundation? What's been, you talked about some of the challenges, what's been the most optimistic thing?
Well, generally speaking, you know, when it happened to me 20 years ago, any spinal cord injury was like almost a death sentence. You're not going, there's no chance you're going to recover. There's no chance you're going to get back any use of your limbs or anything like that. And so, you know, over the last 20 years, through media, social media, other stories, people do know that if they work hard, they can gain a different level of independence. And if they work hard enough, they may get it back, you know. The fact is, if you lay there and do nothing in the hospital, you're not going to get anything back. Sure. But if you work your butt off, the sky's the limit, because I've seen plenty of people walk out of the hospital. They were told they wouldn't, just through, you know, pure determination. But I mean, I still, you know, I mean, I worked my tail off for 10 to 15 years, and yeah, I still can't move my arms, but I travel 140 days a year and 40 flights. And so I finally, I think 8 or 10 years ago, came up to the realization that at least without stem cells or other type of maybe brain interface technology, I'm probably not going to get my arms back. But there's a reason for that, because I find myself talking to a lot of people that are better off than me, i.e. paraplegics and lower level quads and people that can breathe on their own, etc. And it's very easy for me to say to them, what the hell's wrong with you? Why don't you do something with your life? I mean, you know, unless you're on a ventilator, you're not any worse off than me. So why don't you be a productive member of society and support your family, put bread on the table, instead of being a drain on society? I genuinely think that's probably the reason that I haven't, you know, got a lot back, is that, you know, I can roll into the hospital room and be pretty blunt with people, you know. Some people like it, some people don't like it, but, you know, what have I got to lose?
Right. Well, not only that, but what do they have to gain by seeing what you're doing? Yeah. And right?
Yeah, I mean, there's not a week that goes by that somebody doesn't either, you know, send an email or call me, or I see them at the gym, and they're like, man, I mean, you motivated me to get on with my life and figure out what my passion is and just live the dream. You know, I mean, it sucks, but, you know, if you're a paraplegic, you're a hell of a lot better than me, and you got a lot more ability to do a lot of things, So yeah, I don't take any excuses.
So you mentioned earlier Jay Leno's garage as being maybe part of the experience, and I have had the pleasure of watching you and Jay Leno drive a car. And in fact, as I understand it, Sam, you have your driver's license now for an autonomous car. I can't remember exactly what it's called, but I think it's called the Sam car. I'm not sure, but can you? It's pretty. So you can drive.
Yeah, no. SAM is actually an engineering acronym for semi-autonomous mobility.
Okay.
That was come up by Arrow Electronics. It isn't because of my name. That was just a serendipitous situation.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've been on that project for about six and a half years, and it was pretty rude at first. Our goal was to just drive around the Indianapolis Motor Speedway at 100 miles an hour, and Arrow Electronics and their team of engineers out of Denver, came up with a concept and a process, and they accomplished that task in about 8 months, which was truly unbelievable. And I thought that would be the end of it, but they said they wanted to do more, and what do I want to do? And I said, let's go faster, So the next year we came back 150, and third year we came back and raced Mario on the road course, which was a lifelong dream and bucket list item. And then we raced up Pikes Peak, which everybody thought was insane, and it probably was. But then I got my driver's license in 2017 and went 192 in a car so far. And we just keep checking the box. I mean, doing fun stuff and promoting, it really was a bit of a wake-up call for me, because it is, if you have the right resources and the right people, put them in a room and say, accomplish this task, get it done. They can get it done. And, I never thought I'd drive again, but Arrow Electronics made that possible. And for a guy like me, that's almost as good as walking.
Well, I was thinking as you were talking about that, you're 100 miles an hour, 192 miles an hour. Obviously, you were a professional driver, so you've got the mindset about what that is and what that feels like, and most of us don't have that. But you were able, or they basically combined your brain with their vehicle in order to accomplish this. Is that about right? And how do you? First of all, were you scared when you got back in the car and we're going 100 miles an hour? I guess that's first question. But then after that, I was just thinking to myself, how does it actually work? How do you control it? Because I think it's super cool.
Well, that's why Arrow did it in the first place, is to show the world what they're capable of. And they're kind of niche. Their niche in the electronics industry is taking off-the-shelf technology that has been around for a while, tried and proven, and reconfigure it in ways that haven't been used before. So we use infrared cameras. We use, just sort of interface actuators and technology, and it all happens in real time. Like from the time I move my head to the time the car turns is really, I can't tell the difference, right? It's all negligible and immediately. And so again, this has evolved over 7 years from several different forms of equipment and receivers. And at first we had to have the car completely blacked out for light. Now we take off the sunroof and roll the windows down, and the sunlight, it doesn't matter how bright it is. So they've just continued to refine the technology. But ultimately it's cameras looking at my head. I've got on sunglasses with little embedded tracking devices, so that when I turn my head to the left, cameras get a signal, send it to the computer sends it to the steering wheel, car turns, but all instantaneously. I mean, I can't tell the time lag at all. Turn to the left, turn to the right, and then in my mouth, I have a straw like this, which is effectively a sip and puff from a wheelchair. So I blow in that, it goes, I suck, it stops. And, it's progressive. I blow hard, I'm going to light up the rear tires. I just kind of whisper. It just leaves like normally pushing on the gas, and same with the brakes. So it's all proportionate. It's all programmable. So when I drove up Pikes Peak, I had really tight turning radius. When I went 192, they were able to dummy up the steering so that it wouldn't go anywhere but straight, so driving 190 was easier than driving at Pikes Peak by a fair bit, so again, I've got this just wonderful team at Arrow, and it's kind of evolved, different engineers, different years, and some kind of come and go, within the company internally, but amazing opportunity. And we just took delivery of the new mid-engine C8 Corvette, and I'll be driving that in about a week with even new technology on it. So they keep pushing the envelope, and I'm happy to push it with them as long as they'll have me.
And when do they think this will be something that's available to other people like you? So you're sort of you're the test pilot, I guess, right? And
I'm the crash test dummy, yes.
Oh,
but,
okay.
But so far, I haven't been that dummy. But knock on wood, no. I think there's a couple different ways to look at this. This is where we're heading is a merge of this technology, but also autonomous driving coming from the other way. I think the ultimate scenario is where I can just lock down in my car, and because right now the scariest time that I'm driving that car is on the street, because I know what I'm doing, but nobody around me knows what I'm doing. So ultimately, if I can have the comfort of my car not allowing me to run into anybody or run a red light or hit a pedestrian or any of that stuff, that would be the best, sort of in a semi-autonomous takeover format. And so we all know that's coming our way from an autonomous driver standpoint.
Right. Sure.
And then going the other way from a control system, whereas like I would need voice activation to start the car, put it in reverse, adjust my mirrors, that kind of stuff, which we have. So there's that application on a day-to-day basis. But I think more importantly is using these kind of controls for industrial purposes to put people with disabilities back to work.
Oh.
I think that's more important, to drive forklifts or to drive harvesters or to control anything using your mind, which is not that far away, is more important, because let's face it, like when it comes to disabled veterans, right? A lot of times they signed up just to put bread on the table. They go over there, they get their legs shot off or whatever, and spinal cord injury or amputee, and they come back and their livelihood's taken away. They're encouraged to stay home and do nothing. They don't get any vocational training. And it's like, well, why did I do that? There's no support for the battle they're fighting. And I really would like this type of control system, to be offered as a way for these young men and women to get back to work or do whatever they want to do in life,
Right.
And so I think that's really where we're headed with the project, is an effort to show how we can take that burden off of society. I mean, if we could take 1,000, sort of disabled veterans and take them off of, sort of Medicare's payroll and put them on their own payroll at 80 grand a year driving a truck or whatever, that would be so much better for everybody. They'll have a reason to get up every morning, and that other ugly statistic of 20 veterans a day committing suicide. I mean, that's ridiculous. That shouldn't be a real situation in America, period. So that's the kind of bigger picture stuff that Arrow is going after. They have a DoD division and an automotive division, and they're working, sort of all those angles, and just trying to push the envelope.
So a little small world connection here. One of my friends here in Wisconsin was the president of a division at Arrow in his previous job.
Nice.
So yeah, so I know a little bit about Arrow, but
Yeah,
kind of
everybody's like, who the hell is Arrow? They're a new company. Well, no, they're an 85-year-old, company that started in Long Island
yeah,
selling transistors for TVs, and now it's a $30 billion tech company, based in Denver. So they're in 50-something countries, 18,000 employees, and this has really been, you know, eye-opening, for their employees, for their engineers. Um, it's been a way to make everybody a bit cohesive here, and I've just been blessed to be part of the ride, and show what technology can do for people with disabilities. If you just
well,
think about Siri and Alexa
oh yeah,
people with able-bodied people love it, and it's kind of like a neat little thing to be able to turn on the lights. But for somebody like me, that can be life-changing to be able to do that stuff.
yeah,
So
sure.
thank God we're all kind of moving the same direction.
Well, if you if anybody goes to YouTube and they look for Sam's videos, I've watched at least two of you with the car, and I would say that if you watch those videos, you would not think that it's very far off for some of those other applications that you were talking about to be real.
Absolutely, yeah. There's about 15 there, and we do a lot of different things for different people, and some of them are sort of promotional nature, but a lot of them are, whether it's Pikes Peak or there are different technologies deployed, and it's been an amazing, just the unanticipated benefits of doing that project, and a lot of engineers that were thinking about doing other things are now focused on this type of stuff. So um, I think it's just had a lot more impact than anybody originally thought it would, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm glad you made the connection with the other types of applications because I hadn't when
Yeah,
I was thinking driving, but you're right. There's if you can anything that you can drive, you could drive with this technology, I suppose, or
definitely.
and
I
a
mean,
lot of other things with this technology. Just yeah, operating a machine or whatever. You could do all kinds of
yeah,
things.
the connectivity in the world today has evolved where a farmer that gets disabled could drive his harvester from his living room. Period. You know,
Yeah, sure.
using cameras, using control features, and a little bit of geo mapping or GPS.
Yeah.
You could just do it there behind a computer screen. Pretty cool.
So why foundation? You also still have your business hat on, and you become a team owner. Now, I wasn't 100% sure if you had owned teams before the accident or you just got into that after it, Sam. But obviously big time after it.
Yeah, no, I was a driver beforehand, and a paid driver was at the time Sprint PCS, which is then Sprint, which is now T-Mobile, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But that was my last season before I got hurt, and then about a year after I got home, my wife was like, our entire relationship of 7 years, I was on the road 200 days a year, and now I'm home, and there's PT people and nurses and people coming and going. And my wife's like, you really need to find something to do or else this isn't going to work. So, I thought about, I had the degree and could have gotten into finance or could have gotten involved with a company, but, my passion was always racing. So, why not try owning a team? And we started out in Indy Lights, which is the AAA, so to speak, or the College of Racing, just before Indycar,
Mhm.
one level down. And we were very fortunate. In 11 years, we won 7 championships and 80 races, and we were affectionately called the Roger Penske of Indy Lights, which I don't think there's you know, any better
That's
thing to be
a compliment.
called
Yeah.
than the Roger Penske of Indy Lights. And good or bad, in 2011, almost 10 years ago, I was given the opportunity to buy an existing IndyCar team, and it came with sponsorship and with personnel and with equipment, and it was basically a free deal to get a trial run at it. And I just kind of said, well, if we're successful, we'll stay in it. If we're not, we'll go back to Indy Lights. And unfortunately, that first year, we sat on the pole at Indy, sat on the pole at Texas, and had a really good run up, So it's pretty consuming. I mean, it's 55 full-time employees now, and pretty stressful budget at times and all that kind of stuff. But it definitely, feeds the need for the competition and the passion that I have for motorsports. And sometimes I wish it was only Indy Lights, because that was only 10 people and a lot less risk, but then you wouldn't be racing the Indy 500. So
Right.
it's but it's a perfect, I think, world now, in that I can, use my connections in IndyCar to help the foundation in a lot of ways. And then I'm also tied with a company called Braun Ability, where I'm a shareholder and on their board, and they're the largest manufacturer of wheelchair lifts and wheelchair accessible vehicles in the world. So it all is interconnected. We can have, Day at the Races program, where we try to motivate people to get back into what they're passionate about. We can, help, get the Chevrolets and the Firestones of the world to help us with our foundation initiatives. So it's a pretty good little triangle from that respect.
Sam, how do the drivers, either drivers on your team or the rest of the drivers or the driving community, how do they interact with you when it comes to what they're doing every day and what you are doing every day, and kind of what can happen? I'm just you said some really cool stuff about the when you're with other paraplegics and others, how you basically get them to focus on what they can do and not what they can't do. But I'm just curious, especially, and then I'm thinking like what their parents say and, want to know from you and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's the part I love about the sport, but I don't get to do it as much as I'd like. I mean, first and foremost, I got to find the money, or we don't do this. And that's what I find myself spending a great deal of time doing. I really enjoy interacting with the drivers. I remember it like it was yesterday, and a lot of them are kind of shocked because I am older now, and when I start talking to them about driving techniques and brake pressure and trail braking and different things, it's like, oh wow, you really do drive one of these things. I'm like, yeah, I did, and I'm trying to help them not make the mistakes I made, right? And the safety has advanced, leaps and bounds, since I got hurt. So that's again a good thing. But that's probably what I like doing the most, is interacting with the engineers, interacting with the drivers, spending time with the guys. The rest of it is not so much fun, but you can't do one without the other.
And when I talked to you earlier, when we were sort of just getting connected, you had mentioned, I think, that Savannah is getting married. Is it this year or next year?
Next year. She's got engaged about a month ago, so she's looking at dresses and looking at venues and trying to think, can I have a real wedding, or do I have to have a small one? But hopefully, she's 23, graduated over a year ago, and actually had a job lined up in London, but COVID kind of destroyed that, unfortunately for her. But she's a smart girl, and she's gonna save the world. She's just very philanthropic and very giving, and probably talking about going to law school in a year to study international law. So she's got a lot of big goals.
And what about your son, Sam?
Yeah, I mean, Spencer, he's amazing. He's creative. Does a lot of art. Is studying art at Pepperdine, and he's a junior in college.
Okay, got it.
Obviously pretty smart if he's going to school in Malibu.
Yeah, and has he raced? Has he been interested in racing, or is he? It's just not his thing.
Well, we never wanted to discourage them from doing anything they wanted to do.
Sure.
And inevitably, at around 9, 10, 11, they asked if they could race go-karts. And their grandparents didn't want that to happen. But I said, yeah, sure, what the heck, come on out. And right away whether or not they've got the passion, to do it. So we took them out to the track. I had a friend with a bunch of go-karts, and I said, okay, here's the deal. For every hour you spend on the track, you got to spend a certain amount of time prepping the car. And, if you're going to be committed, you're going to be working on the car every day, or you're going to be driving the car every day. And kind of like that Christmas gift that is great for 3 days and then it kind of sits in the corner. With both of them, it was kind of the same thing. And I'm glad that we didn't say no, just like a hard no, but we gave them the opportunity. And at the end of the day, they weren't as committed as it takes to do it. I mean, you got to be all in as a family, as a driver, no different than those, tennis stars and pro golfers. It's what they do every day. Yeah. When they get out of bed, they want to go drive. And I kind of knew going in my kids were like that, but I think they had to discover it for themselves.
And this is my last question for you, Sam. I'm thinking about video games, and the way you drive the car now is sort of like a video game. I feel like video game technology is probably going to have an impact on paralysis. Probably going to. And then I'm thinking about driving. The kids that come up now were raised on video games. Do you think that drivers now are the ones that are committed? Are they better drivers because of that hand-eye or whatever it is, where you didn't have that, I didn't have that when I was growing up? Or do you think, nah, not really?
It doesn't hurt. I mean, driving is such a combined discipline. I mean, most people doesn't think you have to be that physically capable, but I tell you, it's very, very busy, very physically demanding. And being successful at racing is probably 75% mental. But if you can't handle it physically, your mental side's going to slack off, right? Mm-hmm. So the physical, many of the drivers in Indycar are, professional triathlete, level athletes, and aerobic fitness and physical fitness and certain muscles, forearms, necks that you have to focus on. But to your point, I think you see a lot of, especially in NASCAR right now, new guys, William Byron and Ryan Blaney, and number of them that said, they spent 10 years driving simulators exclusively, and therefore the transition from the trucks to the Xfinity to the NASCAR was a lot easier because they had to had all that background on a simulator. But hand-eye coordination is very important, so the simulators can't hurt, that's for sure.
Yeah, and maybe actually there's a connection between not, abusing your body by working in a simulator, because that physical part is that's interesting. I never thought of that.
And every major race manufacturer, Chevy, Honda, everybody, they've got these simulators which are pretty elaborate, and so nowadays you actually do a lot of your setup, a lot of your testing is done in a full-on simulator, as opposed to on the track. So you have less and less track time where you can drive on the racetrack, and more time in a simulator. So all that stuff's important. To your point, they're developing, brain interface technology where there's a computer on your brain that can tell the computer what you're thinking. And I think that'll have a lot to do with the disabled and what we do in the future. So it's all on the table, so to speak, from an opportunity standpoint.
Yeah, because I'm thinking, how far could it be till you have like an exoskeleton or something that you can control just the same way that you can control that car? Well, Sam Schmidt, thank you so much for being on the show and making time to do this.
Not a problem.
It's been a real pleasure. You should check out Sam's videos on YouTube, his foundation, Conquer Paralysis Now, and of course, Arrow McLaren Indycar racing as well. So, so glad that Teresa introduced us and that you made the time today, Sam.
No problem. And yeah, come out to the racetrack sometime and we'll show you what real racing is. And for the fans out there, yeah, IndyCar is on its way up, and we have some really, really exciting racing out there. And so we'd appreciate the fans coming out and say hello.
This broadcast is brought to you by Wincheck Studios. We are an all-in-one educational platform for podcasters that revolutionizes how hosts leverage content to increase engagement with listeners, downloads, and income. We come together to focus on community, collaboration, and collective impact. For more information on how you can interact directly with our hosts, access exclusive live content with offers you can't get anywhere else from our official partners, join our purpose-driven community by visiting www.winject.com. If you're ready to build a career doing what you love, then we're ready to see you there.